Welcome to LSC, it's Sports Time. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today I have with me a teacher from Lindsay Middle School and also basketball coach over at Peninsula Catholic, Gary Smith Sr. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me here, sir.
This is really a kind of a coup because people understand when we get into it, but you grew up not on the peninsula, but up in Colonial Heights?
At Colonial Beach, actually in the Northern Neck.
Okay, Northern Neck. So. Yeah. We'll talk about how you got down there, but when growing up, you played sports?
Basketball, baseball. I mean, growing up in the 60s and the 70s, you pretty much played whatever was in season.
Right. Because
there were no air-conditioned gyms, so you only played basketball inside during the winter time.
Right.
And during the summertime, it was baseball.
Right.
So I wasn't big enough to play football, so thankfully I had people point me in another direction from the football field, but baseball and basketball were my thing.
Well, and then being small, that means you probably played infield?
Played shortstop. I actually started off in the 10th grade on varsity as a second baseman. In 11th grade, I moved to shortstop, and then my senior year, I actually played third base.
Okay, so you played all the positions.
Yeah, played it all. But I've been playing Little League from the time I was 10, and I actually started out as a catcher.
Wow.
So I played every every position on the team except first base.
That's quite remarkable. And then you also, basketball, which was the best love?
I was actually a better baseball player only because I had played baseball from the time that I was 10. But as I got older, baseball kind of became somewhat boring, and I took up basketball. And because I didn't really know a lot about it, I was a natural athlete, I took a liking to basketball. And then by the time I was a sophomore, junior in high school, I had become at least better than average, I would say. Yeah.
All right. So now we're talking. What school did you go to?
Washington and Lee. Washington and Lee in Montrose, Virginia.
Okay. So now, when you go over there, they have 9th through 12th in the school.
Yes, 9th through 12th grade.
So you JVs when?
JV is actually 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. So basketball, I didn't really play organized high school level until my 10th grade year.
Okay.
Played JV, and it's funny because the coach actually thought that I was an 11th grader, so he cut me. And then he found out that I was actually in the 10th grade, and he brought me back.
That was a mistake.
So I played JV in the 10th grade, and then I ended up playing varsity in the 11th and the 12th.
Okay. Now, you had pretty good success. And what position you play in?
Guard. Played guard, defensive specialist. And this is, growing up in the late 70s, there were no three-point shots.
Right.
So, it was like, hey, get the ball inside. And I played in the system, so it was, hey, just get the ball inside, play defense. No three-pointers, so you want the shot to be as close to the basket as possible.
So being a defensive specialist, what did baseball help you in that regard? Or?
It helped me from the standpoint of moving my feet and using my hands. So that part of it, and staying low, and if you had to get on the floor, you get on the floor because that's what you did in baseball. So it actually helped out a lot.
All right. Now, when you graduated from Washington Lee, you didn't go to college. You went into service.
Yeah, I actually, when I came out of school, I was slated to go to play basketball at Virginia Wesleyan. And some things that went down. I ended up going in the Air Force. I had a lot of uncles at the time who were in the military, Air Force. So I went to the military. I went to the Air Force, and that was, at the time, was the greatest thing that happened to me because it allowed me to get away from there. Not that that was a bad thing, but it allowed me to mature and be in an environment where I learned a lot, I got to do a lot, I got to go a lot of places, and I got to see a lot of things.
And discipline.
Discipline, for sure. Discipline.
Well, which goes along with sports anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But while you're in the service, you don't just there and after your work day do nothing. You end up getting not only one degree, but got your master's degree.
Yeah, I actually first I got an associate's degree, then I got my undergraduate degree, and I kept going and I got my graduate degree. And the unfortunate thing is I wish that I would have gotten more advanced degrees, before I retired.
Right.
So I could have. The only thing that stopped me was me.
And then how did you get down here?
I got orders to Langley in 1995, and it was funny because I didn't really know much about Hampton other than Hampton University, Langley Air Force Base, and at the time I had an aunt that was living here, so I really didn't know anything about Hampton other than that. So when I got orders, I had a friend who was doing AAU, and we had just started doing AAU in Delaware. And he's like, hey, you need to call Boo Williams when you get to Hampton. I was like, okay, well, who is that? He's like, Boo Williams is the basketball god. And I was like, oh, okay. So I called Boo when I got here, and I know he probably thought that, like, who is this guy calling me? 'Cause I didn't know who he was. I said, hey, I've got a son who's 10 years old, and I heard about your organization. I want to get him into basketball. What do I need to do? And he said, well, call Butch Harper. So I called Butch Harper at the time, and Butch was like, hey, we already have our teams picked, because this is like February, March when we got here. But bring your son out to Lindsay, and we'll take a look at him, and we'll see what happens for next year. But we've already have our teams picked for this year.
Right.
So I take him out to Lindsay, and I go in the gym, and I told him before we walked in, I said, hey man, that's the way I talk. Hey man, you need to, when you go in there, you need to make sure that you tear them out the frame. Be ready to play, because they already have their teams picked, and you're the new guy, so they're not going to know you, and they're not going to have any mercy on you.
Right. So they're also not going to know how good you are.
They're not going to know how good you are.
Right.
So you're going in there, and they already have their teams. Nobody's going to give you anything.
Right.
But he went in there and represented himself.
Well, that's good.
And that
and you started coaching with Boo.
Yes, I actually.
Was that your first foray into coaching?
I was actually coaching teenagers in Delaware, and I had started coaching some because my daughter played also. So my original goal was to coach my daughter, but when we moved to Hampton, the initial thought was that I was just going to sit in the stands and be a parent. So when we got here, he started playing, and I was in the gym, and during the summer, their coach actually stepped away. So when their coach stepped away, they asked me to volunteer. I volunteered, and
haven't looked back. How many years have you been with Boo?
At least 15. Yeah, at least from 1995 until about 2 years ago.
When did you retire from the military?
2001.
2001.
Yeah, spring
okay.
of 2001.
And now we're going to talk about your son, and the people have to understand you've got on there, my son is my hero.
Right.
Your son passed away at a very early age, and you get everybody's sympathy. And I know but you take this and use it as a positive.
Oh, of course.
And I just think that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about, because your son then was able to go to Hampton High School.
He went to Hampton High School, and he was very small at first. He was probably only about 5'4", 5'5". He started as an 8th grader. Started as a 9th grader, but in his 9th grade year, he grew like 5 inches.
Wow.
So he shot up overnight, but his basketball skills were always at another level, I thought, than everybody else's. He was just advanced, and it was always easy for him. So he excelled at the JV level at Hampton. He excelled at the AAU level where I coached him. Right. But he always did very well, but he worked very hard.
Well, we need to make sure people understand it's Gary Smith Jr.
Gary Smith.
And you're the senior.
Smith, yes.
And and he had a tremendous career at Hampton High School.
Yes, he did.
Talk a little bit about his career, because you was able to watch him grow from 10 years old, going through Boo Williams and right up through Hampton, and then become Player of the Year.
Player of the Year.
As a senior in Hampton.
Yeah, but he worked very hard, and that goes back to him as early as when he first started playing at 8, 9. He just had a very advanced skill set. But the thing that people didn't realize is that he worked very hard outside.
It didn't become just one day he was just a great basketball player.
Yeah,
he put in his time.
He was a natural with it.
Right.
There was nothing that he couldn't do. But even with that, he worked very hard. We never had to tell him. My wife and I never had to tell him to practice. He would be in the driveway, dribbling, shooting. He always did it. So it just progressed to a point that allowed him to become the Player of the Year. Okay,
what was his moniker?
Monster. That was his nickname. And the thing is, people thought, they always asked us, where did his nickname come from? Was he a monster? I mean, was he this bad kid? And no, he wasn't. When he was an infant at the time in 1985, 86, there was this My Pet Monster doll that we had. And he used to be like I won't say a crybaby, but he used to cry a lot. And we would say, okay, we're going to put this monster on you. So then we started calling him Monster, and it just stuck. And such that to the point that through high school, through college, everyone calls him Monster. Right. Everyone.
Yeah. All right, talk a little bit about his career at Hampton.
Well, he was, I would say, just a typical kid. He did very well academically. He graduated with a 3.5, so we never had a struggle from that aspect. But not only was he a good student, a great student, but he was a great person. We never had problems with him getting in trouble, whether it be in the school, whether it be in the community. We always believed in a village to raise a child, so he had mothers in the community. He had other people that were always watching him. So that part of it growing up actually wasn't difficult, because we embraced the importance of the whole community being involved in the growth and development of our child.
Right. But Player of the Year,
yes.
That had to be.
Oh, it was an incredible honor, well deserving. He was very humble, and he never really talked about it. I mean, we never really talked about it. It was okay. Hey, I did it. Great accomplishment, but there's always going to be something else, And it was funny because his last year they played Princess Anne in Virginia Beach in the regional, and we go to the game and they're booing him, and I'm sitting on the bench at the time at Hampton doing stats, and I hear them booing him, and I'm like, what's going on at the game? And so we go down the floor. They go down the floor a couple of times, and they're booing him. So Coach Brown calls a timeout. He comes to the side, and I asked him. I said, "Do you realize that they're booing you?" He's like, "Yeah, I hear it." I said, "Go get him. Just go get him." He ended up with 30-something that night.
Don't make me mad.
Yeah. It's like, hey, they don't need to do that, because he was never that kind of person. He was always quiet. He just played. He wasn't demonstrative. He didn't talk a lot. Kind of like Big Cat at Hampton. He just plays. And I love that about my son, but I also love that about the way Big Cat plays. But people can get under your skin, too.
No, and we talked about what a great job Hampton did this year.
Yeah.
And then Anthony Barber gets up.
And he does that. And I knew him from Lindsay, because he spent his eighth grade year at Lindsay. So I knew him indirectly from that experience, but not really from a basketball standpoint.
Right.
So I followed him, and actually Stephon Tyler, who was my son's best friend, we had went to watch Hampton play during the regionals, and we had watched the play at the state championship game. And even I had taken Monster to see them play during the Christmas tournament, and we watched how Hampton had matured as a team, and we admired that, and I loved the way they played. So I actually saw Barber, I think it was Saturday at Dollar Tree on Big Bethel, and I asked him. Well, first I congratulated him on his season, and we talked about grades, and I told him that I'm cheering for his success and everything else. And then I asked him. I said, "Did that was my son that you were acknowledging?" And he said, "Who's your son?" And I said, "Well, Monster is my son," and he hugged me, and
Right.
Yeah.
People have to understand, though, we didn't exactly explain, but Hampton dedicated this season to your son.
To my son. Yeah.
And I just
that was great. That was incredible.
And I remember seeing you up at when they played William Mary.
Yeah.
And what a great thing. And now your son graduates and goes to VCU and is going to walk on. Jeff Cable is the coach.
Jeff Cable is the coach. He has a meeting scheduled for Jeff to meet with Jeff Cable. I don't remember which day of the week, but he has a meeting scheduled. He goes to the meeting, and Coach Cable's not there. Well, Coach Cable is not there, and he didn't go back. And he always said that was his sign.
Okay, but he didn't give up on playing ball.
He played.
And Stephon Tyler got him.
And in fact, some of the kids that he actually played with out of Virginia Beach, they were all ended up being best friends in college, and they were combatants doing AAU from 10 up to like 16, and then they became college best friends. And they had a little college rec team, and they won 4-year championship 4 years up at VCU.
And there were some players that wanted him to.
Eric Mena actually reached out to us last summer when he first heard that Monster had been sick, and he called and I talked to him, and he said that he had a lot of respect for how Monster had played, and they had supported him and had even tried to get him out there, but once he walked away, he said he realized that was it.
It wasn't destined for him to do that. It wasn't destined for him. Right. All right. And then he gets sick in.
He actually got mono. He had mono thereabouts in January, February of 2010. He started having some complications with mono, and it lingered around for so long that we were wondering what was going on. And the ironic thing is that he started talking about this voice that was talking to him that said that he had cancer.
And nobody had diagnosed cancer?
No, none of the doctors had said it.
But he heard the voice.
Yeah, he said his voice kept telling him, "Dad, I have cancer."
Wow.
His voice was telling
That's got to be tough on Dad. My goodness. Oh, then he gets a bone marrow transplant.
He has a transplant. The transplant, we had a match. So he gets the transplant in December of 2010, and from everything that we thought, everything was going to be okay.
Right.
And then he had complications from toxoplasmosis, which because his immune system was somewhat suppressed, He caught toxoplasmosis, which is an infection that typically cats carry. And we know that he didn't ever come in contact with a cat because we didn't have cats or anything, but somehow he caught this infection, and he just never really got back to 100% after that.
And then when he passed away, when was this?
February, 3 days before his birthday.
3 days before his birthday.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we actually found out in December of this past year that it came back.
Well, and you know how many lives he touched because of what Hampton High did, dedicating to service, and all. I can see why you say your son is your hero.
Yeah. He was a special individual. He was.
Now, I want to kind of wrap this up, and I appreciate you talking about it. This is tough. I don't know that I could do this, what you do. But I just want you to explain how sports helped you, not only in your relationship with your son, but helping you in the military and help you in teaching.
Okay, as Coach Daniels from FIBA's actually called me a week ago, and he said, hey, I admire you and your son parallels my experience with my son. And I said, I coached him, and one of the things I always said was if somebody's going to coach him, it's going to be me.
Right.
And then Coach Daniel was like, but it was more than that. And I was like, yeah, okay. And he's like, you spent so much time with him. And that's the part that you can't take away.
Right.
From the time, the AAU circuit, during the summers and during the school year and all of that. We just spent a lot of time together with him, and that's important.
Yeah.
So that experience is invaluable. As we grow and develop our young men, and not just our young men, but our kids in general.
Right.
As we try to do the right thing by our kids, it's important that we spend time, because they're going to spend time with somebody.
Right. And so why not with a good role model?
But again, he obviously had his mom and his dad at home, and his sister and his brother, but he had some people in the community. Gloria Petaway, she lives right across from the softball from Lindsay. She was like a second mother to him, and then Stephon Tyler's mom, Sherry. They were like mothers to him, so we always knew when he was with them, I never had to worry. And then with him and he and Stephon being best friends, whenever he and Stephon were together, I never worried about, what kind of decision is he going to make? What are they going to do? Are they going to get in the wrong thing or whatever? Just never had that worry about him. But that was a part of who he was, but it was also a part of the things that he embraced as a person, being a good citizen, being a good student, being a good person in general, because that's important, and it has nothing to do with color. That should be things that we all embrace.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to LSC and Sports Time. I want to thank our special guest, Gary Smith Sr. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Until next time.